Hey everyone, welcome back to the Collector's Compass, the official podcast of Collectors MD, where we explore the intersection of collecting, mental wellness, and responsible engagement across the modern hobby. I'm your host, Alyx founder of Collectors MD, and today's guest is someone whose voice has become increasingly important in a space that desperately needs accountability. Jack Miller, known on social platforms as JBM Cards, has built a reputation as one of the few hobby voices willing to speak openly about the manipulation, misinformation, and pressure tactics emerging across the live selling ecosystem. His recent breakdown of a whatnot seller falsely claiming a $2,000 comp on a Yoshinobu Yamamoto PSA 9 when recent sales were really closer to $300 sparked a massive conversation about truth, urgency, and how easily collectors can be steered into bad decisions. But Jack isn't here for drama. He's here because he understands the buyer experience, the seller experience, and the hidden mechanics that shape the live auction environment. He's seen how countdown timers, hype-driven rooms, and selective data can push people into overspending, and how quickly trust erodes when sellers prioritize performance over transparency. Jack, it's great to have you, man. Welcome to the Collector's Compass.
Thank you, Alyx. Thank you for having me on.
Of course. For listeners who may not know the full background, can you share how you got into creating hobby-related content and what motivated you to speak publicly about what you saw happening in the live selling space?
Yeah, well, when we got started, first of all, I've been collecting for a long time. I've been collecting since I was probably 10 years old. So it's put me in the hobby for over 20 years now. And I really got back into it maybe 3 years ago. A lot of hobby scene here where I moved to in Colorado. And so it put me back in with collectors. It put me back with card shows and local card shops. So I kind of dove right back in and recognized that there was a large social media platform for the hobby, and which was great, and it connected me, and I built relationships off of that. But one of the things that I started to notice was the amount of collectors that were significantly newer to the hobby, right? Maybe in the last couple of years or since COVID, we had a huge amount of people join the hobby in COVID. And so recognizing that there was a area to help people who had, questions that maybe those of us who are in the hobby understand, right? I mean, simple stuff. What does PWE mean? What does comp mean, right? What is eBay? There are things that for us we take for granted every day, that this is just common knowledge in the hobby. And there are people who legitimately don't know that. And so it really started as very simple. I was on TikTok. I would post some videos, very basic stuff, how to ship your cards, how to protect cards, how to list stuff on eBay, very simple. And really started to recognize that the questions I was getting, that there are people who just didn't really understand a lot of the hobby. And so started taking that, branching out a little bit, moved away, but still have a decent amount of stuff on TikTok and on Twitter, and just interacting with people. I love interacting with people at our local shows and just answering those questions. So Whatnot entered the conversation for us probably about 2 years ago. We actually started selling on Whatnot right when it kind of was blowing up and everybody was getting on the Whatnot hype train. We tried it out, thoroughly enjoyed it. In the ability to talk to people and see people, which is a little different than obviously like an eBay selling or a stack selling or selling through sales posts. It's more similar to a live show. And so we enjoyed it. But in that, we became buyers and we started going around, and we noticed a lot of issues, concerns, things that, again, for us as, when I say us, I'm talking about, so we're a family hobby. And so JBM Card stands for Jack, Brittany, and Michael. So that's our family. And so we all have a little bit. I do baseball. My wife does Star Wars. My son does Pokemon. And so we all enjoy the hobby together and collect together. And as we bought, we really noticed that there was some really manipulative behavior from some sellers. And so just putting out some warning signs to people who maybe don't understand that there are things outside of Whatnot. There are things outside of eBay. There's a larger hobby, and there are ways that they can protect themselves, and they just don't understand that.
Yeah, I love that your brand, JBM Cards, and I didn't realize this until you just explained it, is a combination of you, your wife, and your son. That's what the hobby's all about. It's about engagement, enjoying something that you've loved your entire life with those closest to you, right? Collecting is rooted in things like joy and nostalgia and community. And those things can be shared with family members. And so, a lot of the mechanics that have been embedded and introduced to the hobby space are taking away a lot of that purity that we always talk about. And so people are losing sight of the things that are really important that they should, be focused on. They should be prioritizing. And they're just getting lost and sucked in by the hype, by the dopamine chase, by the gambling like mechanics. And so I love that you're doing this with your family and that, you're calling out the predatory behavior that we're seeing. And so on that note, let's jump into our first segment. And so I think this is a good segue. The first segment is called The Clip, the Lie, and the Mechanics of Manipulation. So let's start right where this conversation began. You posted a viral clip last month showing a seller claiming a $2,000 sale when the true comp wasn't even remotely close. So walk us through exactly what happened and why you felt compelled to call it out.
Yeah, so I will say TikTok is great. There are some really great accounts, and all credit to them. They go through and they will take clips from very large whatnot streamer shows of people overpaying or scamming behavior, and they do a great job of putting that out there and showing those accounts and trying to warn people. Ultimately, at the end of the day, in a whatnot show, if you go into a whatnot show and you type, "Hey, you're lying to these people, these comps are over," you're going to get banned, and you're not going to have that voice. And so it is tough, but they do a great job of just trying to put people, get that information out to people. So I saw that clip. I love to watch those clips. It helps me to see see the comments on it and see what people were thinking about these things in the hobby. And this one specifically, though, I thought really rang out because there's a lot of overpaying that happens in the hobby. It's not just whatnot. It is literally any platform, anywhere you go, overpaying happens, overpricing happens. It's a part of the hobby. But the one thing that really struck a chord to me on this clip is that you have, before the sale is final, you have a false comp, a narrative that's built that this card is worth a certain amount of money, right?
Right.
And it has never even touched, it even gotten halfway to that number. And so you created in a short amount of time this false pretense of what this card is worth. And you do that knowing that nobody can check you. Nobody can see if you're lying or not. You have just told a lie to increase the sale of this card. And so that specifically bothered me. And that there are a lot of things they can go wrong and whatnot, a lot of things that I do think are predatory. But that one specifically, I think is incredibly close to fraud. You've created a false price to try to get people to pay more for this card, and knowing that in a 10-second sudden death, nobody is going to be able to say anything to counter you. And so that really struck a chord specifically to me. And the fact that typically when that happens, the seller then tries to make people feel guilty that they didn't pay as what they should and they're losing money. And so they're trying to build that for future cards that people think, oh, this guy's losing money on cards, so I need to keep bidding up and bidding higher and higher and higher because he's getting, we're getting steals and he's losing money. And so it just creates a really bad narrative for those people who don't understand or aren't, maybe haven't been in the hobby long enough to understand that they're actually making a ton of money.
Yeah. I'm actually trying to find the clip because I actually think it would be super helpful to provide some context around what that clip contained and the behavior behind it. But you post a lot on X, and just scrolling down here, I'm not even getting close to, I think it was November 6th. So unless you have immediate access to it, I instead think it'll be helpful to share the daily reflection that I wrote on it.
Yeah.
On that day that you posted it, or at least on the day that you and I had gotten in touch after I saw your tweet and we kind of unpacked it a little bit. So I'm going to just quickly read this daily reflection because, again, I think it'll add context, and it's important for people to understand the nature of what's going on here. So the headline, or the title of the daily reflection, is "The Price of a Lie." It was published on November 6th. And so once again, another live stream clip. Oh, I have it linked here. Perfect. So I'll show it right after. Once again, another live stream clip is making its rounds in the hobby, this time featuring a whatnot seller blatantly lying about a card's value. He claims the last sale was $2,000 when the real comp was closer to $300. The card ultimately sells for $650, more than twice its true value. And the buyer is congratulated for getting a steal, but the real loss isn't just money, it's trust. Moments like this reveal how far the culture of hype and manipulation has spread. What used to be about discovery and shared passion has turned into a high-speed game of deception. Platforms like Whatnot reward noise, urgency, and performance. The louder and faster you yell, the more likely you are to keep people bidding and chasing without ever stopping to see what's actually happening. But when those theatrics are paired with engineered misinformation, it's not savvy salesmanship, it's deliberate exploitation. And this is a screenshot of the clip, which again, I'll show shortly. But as you can see here, the card in question is the 2024 Top Sapphire Yoshinobu Yamamoto Gold Sapphire variation in a PSA 9. I believe the last comp, and you can see it was circled here, was $300. And in this clip, which we're about to show you, the Whatnot seller declared in the heat of the moment that the last comp was $2,000. And so, as you can see, this was a sudden death auction. The buyer ended up winning it for $650. And so the caption of this image is, the format itself fuels the problem. These sudden death auctions aren't built for informed decision making. They're built for reaction. 10 seconds on the clock, flashing graphics, shouting hosts, and a live chat egging you on. It's sensory overload by design. The goal isn't to give buyers time to think. It's to keep them locked in emotion, chasing urgency instead of clarity. And here's where the deception hides. When a seller references best offer comps on eBay, the numbers they show aren't always real. When an item sells via best offer, eBay's public sold page only shows the original asking price, sometimes with a line through it, not the actual accepted offer. Without hobby tools like 130 Point or Card Ladder, and I'll also mention Market Movers because we just partnered with them, a buyer can't see what an item really sold for. Some sellers know this and weaponize it. They reference inflated eBay last sales that only show the asking price, not the real accepted offer, knowing very well that buyers don't have a chance to check during 10-second sudden death auction. A mechanic strategically and deceptively designed for that very reason. And so this is an example of that. This is actually not even something that we discussed or unpacked, but it's also important to call out. This isn't the PSA 9 version that was sold here. This was a PSA 10, and even that didn't do close to $2,000. And so the last two comps from the date of this article being posted, looks like November 2nd were the last two comps. One did 800, one did 500 in a PSA 10. So the caption here is, on eBay, the public listing might show a card with an $800 sold price when in reality it was accepted at $500. Okay, so I just explained that incorrectly. This is the same card and the same comp. The one on the top is from eBay, where they're not showing the best offer price accepted. The one on the bottom is from 130 Point. That's showing the line through the $800 and the actual sale price of $500, which again, for whatever reason, eBay doesn't share that information. It's always been that way. They've never fixed that feature, but it is what it is. So on eBay, the public listing might show a card with an $800 sold price when in reality it was accepted at $500 through their best offer feature. To the untrained eye, those numbers look the same. One looks like a premium comp, the other looks like a realistic market value. But to a manipulative seller, that $300 gap is opportunity. It's the difference between truth and theater. And in a high-speed sudden death auction, theater almost always wins. That's how manipulation thrives, in the split-second gap between hype and truth. And when platforms allow that behavior to go unchecked, they become complicit in it. Every dishonest comp, every false claim, every what an absolute steal that isn't true chips away at the integrity of the hobby. It replaces education with exploitation and community with chaos. If we want to rebuild the foundation of collecting, it starts with transparency. Sellers must own the responsibility to inform, not mislead. Buyers must slow down and verify, even in the chaos of high-pressure moments when the host and chat are simultaneously screaming bid and go. And platforms must stop rewarding behavior that preys on impulse. Integrity has to matter more than engagement. Truth has to matter more than sales, because once honesty becomes optional, the hobby stops being about collecting and starts being about control. Truth builds trust, and trust is the real currency of the hobby. So bear with me one moment. I'm going to pull up the clip itself, and this was your tweet. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So I got to turn the volume on.
$2,000 card right now. $2,000.
Can you hear it?
Yep.
Okay, great.
$1,000 card, set a max bid. Set a max! Set a max bid. Set a max! It's a $2,000 card right now, guys. A $2,000 card with 25%. Guys? Oh no. Oh no. Is this a joke? Fucking Joe, bro. Really? Yo. What a buy. That one hurts. What a buy.
He says, what a buy. Oh, this was exposing whatnot. So you didn't create this this reel or this TikTok.
No, so that's credited to exposing whatnot on TikTok. And again, there's several. They're one of them. There's a lot of TikTok, you know, we're looking for creators who create videos around whatnot sellers, and it's almost become a little bit of a meme in the hobby community. Yeah. There's these dishonest whatnot sellers or crazy whatnot sellers to the point that it's almost laughable, and they're literally just making fun of these sellers.
Yeah, I need to get in touch with them. If there are any others that you know of, I would love to touch base after the episode so that we can potentially get in touch with some of them, because this is really important to call out. And, you know, one caveat here is that Collectors MD is not about negativity or calling folks out or being a watchdog or any of that. It's more so about raising awareness and educating people so that they know what they're getting into. And this is something that, you know, illustrates quite perfectly the experience that many people, you know, endure on whatnot. So I want to unpack this a little bit more. So the tweet that you posted on November 6th says, if you just straight up lie about the value of a card, you should be banned. Absolutely scummy behavior from the seller, and why buyers need to do research before buying anything. Credit exposing whatnot on TikTok. And then, okay, so it's November 5th. I don't think I saw it until November 6th, because our mutual friend Paul, who will also be on the Collectors Compass in the new year, which I'm really excited about. Great guy, great member of our community. Shout out, Paul. But Paul tagged me in this post, I believe, somewhere. He sent it to me. And so you could see, I mean, I'm not going to read them all, but some of the comments that these types of guys are scum. There's, you know, you responded, there's a lot of dumb whatnot stereotypes that you can almost laugh off, but directly saying a card is worth 5 times more than comps to get it to sell higher is just fraudulent. I mean, you know, we jumped in and said this is one of the biggest issues we're seeing in the hobby right now. A lot of sellers on whatnot are intentionally misleading buyers by referencing best offer comps on eBay that don't actually show the real final value sale. Platforms like 130 Point and Card Ladder and Market Movers show the actual accepted offer, and when you check, the true numbers are off significantly lower than what's being presented to buyers in the moment of a high-pressured 10-second sudden death auction. When the price transparency is intentionally obscured, it stops being collecting and becomes manipulation. Education plus accountability is the only way forward. And then I posted a screenshot. So this is everything I just discussed in the daily reflection. I mean, Grant's Break says, I absolutely hate whatnot for this reason. Everything else is great, but too many people get on and say, wow, we are so low when you were double the value, even on $5 cards. They're like, wow, $10 is so low. So it really is across the board. I'll just quickly scroll here. Here's Paul, the card father, tagging me on November 6th, which got me involved in the conversation here. And, you know, when I posted this on Instagram, I think it was the daily reflection or the tweet itself. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I tagged Sacramento Cards, and I didn't do it publicly. I hid the tag. I lowered it to like below, you know, the fold on the screen so nobody could see. I cropped out their name. You saw in the daily reflection that I crossed out names. We're not about exposing people or calling people out, but really I wanted to alert them so maybe that they could see, you know, the conversation that's happening around this. And what did they do? They didn't respond. They simply blocked me. Couldn't see their account a couple hours later, and that was that. And you know, it's just how some folks operate, and they just ignore the critics and the hate and the the feedback, good or bad. And so, we weren't coming forward with hate or, venom or animosity. It was more so just like, what's going on here? How can we fix this? How can we work with the platforms, with the breakers, with the sellers to layer in those safeguards, the accountability that has been so desperately needed for years now? And so I know I just went off on a tangent, but again, I think it was really, really important to highlight a lot of this. If you want to check out, more of the responses in this tweet, again, it was over a month ago. You can go to the Daily Reflection from November 6th, click on that link, and you'll be able to read all of those tweets. But I want to transition over to my next question for you. But do you have anything else that you wanted to share on that topic?
I think it's interesting on that tweet. Obviously, Paul tagged you. You saw Grant's Breaks. Those are guys that are friends of mine in the hobby. They're good guys in the hobby, and I think it really does matter to surround yourself with good people. Right? The hobby is just like anything in life. It's relational. It's about people, and so the people that you have around you. Who, what are they doing in the hobby? What are they like in the hobby? Who do you want to be known with and associated with? And I think that's really important to get people around you and build a circle of people that are obviously, in the hobby too, but also the right way, right? They want to do things the right way. They also are collectors. They don't want to hurt people. They want to make sure the hobby is in a good spot going forward. I think it's really important to surround yourself with good people. And it makes the hobby experience better really for everybody. And as a person in the hobby, make sure that you are the kind of person that people want to be around and that you're not doing anything that could come back and be seen as scummy, that you are above board and that you are doing what you should be doing to help further the hobby so that people, want you in their friend group.
Yeah, absolutely. And what struck so many people wasn't just the lie itself, it was how effortlessly it worked, right? And so this type of behavior just makes for these dangerous moments, these moments of weakness and vulnerability for the people that are involved, right? From the buying standpoint, because all they're doing is, it's sensory overload again. They're hearing the breaker or the seller scream on the top of their lungs, go, bid, right? Like, how is this going for so low? They throw on a 10-second sudden death auction. You don't even have time to hear yourself think, let alone, go to one of these, these data platforms to check the comp and do your research before making, a significant purchase. Even at $650, that's a lot of money for one person to just mindlessly spend, on an impulse. Right. So it's just really, really important for people to understand that and know that a lot of sellers on Whatnot, and there are good ones. Shout out Pepperoni Rips. It's one of the members of our community. He is one of the most honest and transparent sellers you'll ever find, not just on Whatnot, but across the entire hobby. And he's become a really, really important member of our community. And so I just wanted to give him a quick shout out there. But this type of stuff is dangerous, man. And the urgency, the chat hype, the misrepresented data, all of it just feeds into all of the issues that we're seeing day to day in this industry, in this hobby. So I've talked a lot about this in our daily reflections. These formats are just engineered for reaction, not reflection. And so what do you think collectors misunderstand most about 10-second auctions, flashing countdowns, and high-speed bidding environments?
Yeah, I mean, it's a creation of Whatnot, right? Any platform to make money, right? I mean, it is a way to strip away barriers and really play on that fear of missing out. And so it's a manufactured kind of hype that makes money, and so that's why it works, because it makes money. And so it is, as a collector, even for me. So obviously I'm a collector, but also I sell, and full transparency. I've sold on Whatnot, I've sold on eBay, I sell in person. The hobby for me, what I do selling cards is a great way for me to fund the hobby for me, and it's allowed me to buy cards that I probably would not have been able to buy several years ago. But it's also built a lot of great relationships and met a lot of people through it. But even for us, we have very specific rules. We have things that we don't break those rules when it comes to buying. And I think if you're a new collector, there's just so many things that you don't know. And if you don't have a good support group, if you don't have an understanding, then you don't even know what rules you should have for yourself. You don't know what could happen. Shout out Paul. I knew he was going to do something like that, but
yeah, real quick for those listening on our audio platforms. Paul, again, one of the wonderful members of our growing community. He's in our group chat. He joins our weekly meetings. He participates in the Discord. He comments on social. He's great. He just flashed a comment on here that says Jack is one of the best and classiest people in the hobby. Elevate good people and continue to call out the predatory garbage, and we are on our way to making a real difference. He also texted our group, which by the way has like 40+ people in it, and said Jack is one of the genuinely good ones in the hobby. There should be a great convo. He's also fairly insulated from what we do at Collectors MD, so it might bring some unique perspective. So just love the engagement and the feedback, and this is the type of stuff that again just helps shift culture. So
I think it is just really, really important to continue to just inform, right? Yeah. There's just a lot of with so many new collectors, and one thing that Whatnot specifically, maybe more so than other platforms, is that they advertise. They advertise to the new collector. Right. And so if you are a collector, you may not even know that there is hobby Twitter. You may not know there's hobby Instagram. You may know eBay. You may know local shows that you've gone to or your local card shop. You don't know about the hobby outside of your world. I think that's actually more collectors than we realize, that they don't understand that there's a huge hobby platform on socials. But Whatnot has now started targeting, and there's a lot of ads that run on many platforms for Whatnot and all the different things that you can buy. And they have a very specific, targeted ad to card collectors and the deals that you can get on Whatnot. And so you're trying to get people to join a platform, right? You're really reaching out and trying to get them into a platform that then has almost zero help for them. Right. They're kind of thrown in, and so they are navigating a platform without help, without guidance, and without a support group. And so it is, I think, just incredibly important that these platforms like TikTok and like Collectors MD and really anybody that just bring information so that the people who maybe somebody will see it. Maybe somebody else, I need to educate myself more. I didn't even realize this was a thing. I guarantee you there are people, that lobby probably had 300+ people in it, just by the fact that giveaway had almost 160 people in it. There was a ton of people in that hobby. And I guarantee you there were at least 25-30% would tell you that was a steal for that card. They would have no idea that card was misrepresented. And right. So just continuing to bring that and bring awareness, I think, is incredibly important in the hobby.
Absolutely, Jack. I think you brought up several really, really important points here. And the first is Collectors MD and everything we do, this conversation itself, it's not anti-hobby. It's not about calling people out or creating polarizing content that is going to draw engagement or draw clicks. It's just about spreading awareness and educating people who just don't know, like you said, the ins and outs, the nuances that come with this space. And then, another thing that you mentioned, the new users, the hobby platforms run on churn, right? That's plain and simple. They don't need long-term educated collectors. They just need a consistent stream of new users who don't yet know the red flags. They don't understand the comps. They don't realize how the mechanics are stacked against them. New users, they end up spending faster. They chase harder. They question less. And platforms know this. So instead of building systems that foster things like longevity and sustainability, they build systems that maximize early stage excitement, right? Things like flashy UIs, countdown timers, aggressive promos, first break free. We're talking about like casino-like incentives here, right? The push notifications, the rewards programs, the FOMO-driven marketing, all of it. Because once someone becomes informed, intentional, and cautious, they stop being profitable in the same way, right? churn isn't a flaw in the model. It just is the model. So the platforms burn through these beginners, if you will, the newbies. They replace them with more beginners, and the cycle just continues to repeat. That is the churn. And so that's why, again, education, transparency, and harm reduction, which in our world we call intentional collecting, is just so important. Without them, the hobby becomes this revolving door of people who just get pulled in quickly and burned just as fast. Right. So all of this is just really, really important. We can't make change. We can't help people. We can't shift culture unless we continue to spread awareness. And Collectors MD is a peer-driven community. It's not just me. It's everybody. It's all the folks, all the guests that we bring on this show. It's everybody that joins our weekly meetings, those in the group chat, those in the Discord, those that comment and follow us on social media. So it's our duty as collectors, as responsible and intentional collectors, to continue paying it forward, spreading this message to more and more people, especially the new people that are joining this space, because without it, they're set up for failure, and they're blind to all of the things that we're talking about. So with that, we're going to transition over to our second segment, which is live selling psychology, platform incentives, and why buyers keep getting burned. So you've seen both sides, Jack. You've bought on these platforms and you've sold on them. So what do collectors still not understand about the incentives behind live selling?
So, I mean, I still buy on Whatnot. I think it's a very valuable tool, and I think it goes back to your point. I'm not here to try to demonize anything. Every single platform and every single thing about any hobby in the world has good and bad. And Whatnot is a platform just like eBay and just like Twitter or X. And so I still buy on there. But again, we have a set of rules that we go by, and we don't break those rules. And it's incredibly important to us. And as a seller, my job is harder because we don't do auction driven sales. We do, we'll post it at a price, and we'll take offers on that price, but we will post our price, our desired price for that card. And because we post on X, similarly to eBay, you now have all the time in the world to research that card and decide it's just a smart, buying decision. Just like when we set up at a sale or when we set up at a show, people are going to come by, they're going to look, they're going to comp it out, but they have time. That card's not going anywhere in 10 seconds. And so it gives them the ability to kind of control what they want to spend on it. And look, there are people who are going to pay over comps all the time. If I really want a card and I haven't seen that card and now that card is up, I may pay double comps because I really want that card. There are situations where paying high for a card is totally understandable. And I don't think we should live in a world where you have to pay less than the last comp. It is that I'm going to try to manipulate a market. I'm going to try to make as much money as I can. And I really don't care about the people who are buying the card. I care about the money I make off of that card. And I think the clip shows several parts of it. I think sudden death is one of the worst things you could possibly have on a platform. Because again, it just takes all ability away to go in and make an informed decision. You have intentionally created a FOMO atmosphere with that sudden death option and 10-second auctions. And I think the ability to have a live chat is obviously it's something that's built on that platform, but I think it can be really harmful as well, because you can have people who obviously could be mods for that person or could be friends with that person who are, again, hyping up the chat and now putting things in a chat to go along with the person speaking to create that atmosphere of, hey, this card is worth a lot. You guys are going to steal. And then at the very end of that clip, you have that seller, guilting. And so you create, it's all about that personality, right? You can now create your own atmosphere as a seller. And obviously when you create your own atmosphere, you can make it incredibly beneficial for yourself and give yourself the leg up. And so I think that is the, again, with live selling, I do think there's some great benefits to it. I enjoy interacting with people. So I like the live setting of having and being able to respond back to chat in a live setting. I do like that. I just think there needs to be a few more guardrails put on to kind of even out the playing field.
Yeah, well said. The sudden death auctions specifically are they're dangerous because they remove the only thing that protects a buyer, which is time to think, right? And so with a 5 to 10 second countdown, buyers can't do things like we're talking about here, check comps, they can't verify these claims. And by the way, a lot of the claims come from mods in the group and in the chat, and these are folks that support one another. They support each other's platforms, and so they do the same thing for each other. They're just throwing out fake comps and pumping up prices and all these things. They can't regulate emotion and they can't escape the pressure of the room. And so the format is engineered for impulse, not informed decision making. And when you mix that with hype, shouting, chat pressure, and manipulated last sales, it becomes this perfect environment for overspending and regret. They're not fast. They're predatory by design. And so that's exactly why, the sudden death formats are so dangerous. They're built to trigger emotion, not thought. So that leads to the bigger question. What do most collectors not understand about incentives behind live selling? Most people think these streams are just about cards, but they're not. They're about things like retention and velocity and viewer engagement. And the metrics platforms use those things to reward sellers and push streams to the top of the algorithm. And so sellers aren't trying to move product. They're trying to keep you engaged, keep you in the room, keep you bidding, and keep the energy high because the platform pays attention to the pace of the action, not the fairness of it. And so the faster the room moves, the more pressure buyers feel, the more pressure the buyers feel, the more they spend. And the more they spend, the more the platform pushes that seller to new users. It's a feedback loop where hype equals visibility, which equals revenue. And so that's the piece most collectors, I think, miss. It's that live selling isn't designated to help buyers make informed decisions, right? It's designed to maximize impulsive ones. So my next question for you, in our community, we talk a lot about the psychology behind these environments, things like FOMO, things like sunk cost, parasocial trust, urgency. And so from your vantage point, why are buyers so vulnerable in these high speed moments?
I think the hobby in the last, well, specifically since COVID, has become about having the brightest, shiniest toy. It's about I need to have the cool, I need to have what I think is valuable or what could be valuable years down the road. And so you put yourself in a position with live selling where you see things and it, again, bright, shiny, this looks cool. And so for us, for me, I collect very intentionally. I know what I want to collect. I have, so if the wall behind my computer is full of Braves patch autos. That's what I collect. My wife collects autographs of a specific Star Wars character. So when we buy something for our PC, we're going to be intentional about it. It's going to be something that we specifically want or have wanted, so we kind of know what we're looking for. And there's definitely a group that has come in and has kind of been told that the hobby is about just having the most or having the nicest or having the most expensive. And so you'll get cards in that you actually don't care about this person or this team. You care about, oh, I really want to make money off this card, or this card is super valuable, or I want to have all these really nice cards. So it has just gone away from what it was. I mean, here's the reality, right? College football, we say this all the time. College football now is not what college football was 20 years ago. College athletics, right, has changed, and many people don't love it. I don't love it, whatever. Collecting's the same way. Collecting is not what it was when we were kids, right? Where you walked in and there was a base set. I walked to Walgreens and for $2 got a pack of 2004 Topps baseball. I had every single card in that set. There was nothing to chase. It was the collecting. It was cards. I would go to my local card store. I'm sure the dude made more money off of Powerball tickets than he did cards. And I would buy a $5 box that just had random baseball cards in it. I would go through and I would sort them and I would look at the players and look at the stats. That is going away. That is not the hobby anymore. The hobby now is, who cares about these $2 base cards or collecting teams that you like? It's about having the nicest, the best, whoever dies for the most wins. And it is really kind of warped the hobby to this massive money-making machine. there's still a lot you can do. And I love the fact that we have nicer cards now. I have cards that, they would have made 20 years ago, and I get to have game used cleats in my collection for my favorite players. So I'm not against, new cards. It's just, again, that intentional part of collecting what you actually want, and having joy in finding it versus just owning the most or the most expensive.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and you brought up a good point. I like the reference of college football and how that's evolved, obviously with NIL and all sorts of bells and whistles that they've added to the sport. But every industry evolves. That's normal, right? Innovation, new formats, new technology, that's all part of growth for anything, not just industries, but the world in general. But evolution only works when it's paired with things like accountability and responsibility, right? Otherwise, it just stops being evolution and starts being things like exploitation. And so, in a healthy industry, evolution means improving the experience for the consumer. And in the hobby right now, we're seeing evolution that only really benefits the platforms and the sellers first. Speed, pressure, mechanics, aggressive monetization, without the guardrails that protect the people funding from the ecosystem, right? So the distinction is pretty straightforward. Evolution is healthy when it moves the industry forward. It becomes harmful when it moves forward without protecting the people coming along for the ride. So I don't think innovation per se is the problem. It's really just the lack of accountability around that innovation. Innovation, growth, evolution, all these things, they're inevitable. Like, that's going to come with anything in the world, like I said, but we just have to make sure that we're keeping up with it, and we're layering in things like guardrails and regulation and oversight, even if it's not from an outside governing body like a gaming commission or SEC. But if we can find a way to manage it internally, then we can get ourselves on the right path towards things like intentional collecting. We can't wait around for the platforms to reform or to make the changes that are necessary. And so again, that's where Collectors MD comes in. We can provide you with the tools and resources that are necessary to get you on the path towards intentional collecting. Or if you feel like you can no longer have a healthy relationship with collecting, abstinence is an option too. So with that, a lot of these mechanics that we're talking about mirror gambling in ways most collectors might not recognize, right? It's embedded in kind of a deceptive way a lot of times. So do you think the platforms like Whatnot, like Fanatics Live, understand the psychological levers they're pulling, or have they become blind to the unintended consequences?
I think it's a really interesting question. eBay and Whatnot, I would say, are kind of different because, again, while we only use them, or I only use them for cards, obviously there's a lot of selling that goes on those platforms that has nothing to do with trading cards, and they are much larger than just the hobby. They're just a platform. Fanatics obviously would be more towards just a hobby platform. I think Fanatics probably more so knows. I do think that there is a kind of an essence that eBay and Whatnot probably don't fully understand. They know they're making money. They know these are platforms that, this is what's going to draw people in, and they're looking for ways to help those sellers and make sure their sellers make money so they make money. But I would doubt that there are people at eBay that are sitting around worrying about the morality of what they're doing when it comes to trading cards.
Right.
And that it again with a hobby, there's just very little regulation, right? There's very little that goes into saying what is the standard. I mean, we can't even agree on what a comp is in the hobby, right? I mean, that goes around. So it is definitely challenging because it's people, right? It's relational, and we've created a hobby that we all love, but we all have to self-regulate,
Right.
and that's tough. And
it's very tough.
It goes back to, again, having good relationships, having good people in your circle.
Yeah. having people that can look out for you and hold you accountable and be there for you as a layer of support and a safety net if or when things start to spiral. But a huge part of the problem is, on one hand, there are a lot of people that are spiraling in isolation who might not necessarily have that support system in place. And then on the other hand, there are folks that are just in denial. Maybe they're hiding transactions or purchases and, packages. And so there's a whole mixed bag of issues going around that are directly tied to a lot of the mechanics and the behavior that we're seeing in the modern hobby. So with that, we're going to shift over to our third segment, which is trust, integrity, and what a healthier marketplace requires. So you said something to me when we met privately last month that stuck with me. This isn't just about money, it's about trust. So why do moments like that Yamamoto auction hit so hard for the average collector?
Well, I think it's really difficult because you have to remember that on a live stream platform, you feel connected to the seller. Right? So just to give an example, we're really big into the Star Wars card side of whatnot. For us, because that's a big part of our business and something we collect with. There's a very large hobby community of Star Wars on there that's tough to find in other places. And so you feel a parasocial connection to those sellers because you're talking about cards, collections, what you found. You're talking to people in the chat. The reality is, though, at the end of the day, this is, again, not every seller. Obviously, there are some really good sellers. There are going to be bad sellers on any platform. But just remembering that person does not know you or owe you anything. And, you may think that you have a great relationship with them, but there's a lot of cases where you have to remember they are there to make money and it's their business. And they are trying to make a profit. And I'm not, again, saying there's anything wrong with that. Obviously, we make money selling cards, right? There's nothing wrong with that. It is just that understanding that the person you are hearing from and talking to and buying these cards from, unless you actually know them in real life, you don't actually know what their intentions are. And I think that there's a lot of trust given because of, this person has 300 people in their lobby. They must be a trusted seller. This person has 100% feedback. They must be trusted. And obviously those are things that are good and they help people to see, if you have bad feedback, then that's something good. But there are, with a live auction, like on eBay, nobody's telling you, okay, well, there's 300 people trying to buy this card. You can see the watches, but you don't see like all the number of people have looked at it. Whereas on whatnot, you see, okay, well, this lobby has 600 people or 700 people. These guys must be trustworthy. And then you're there with them. You're getting their giveaways. You're hearing them talk. And so you're just building this parasocial relationship that ultimately I think that there should be kind of a greater, what I'm looking for, but less trust given so easily. Just because they have a brand name, just because they have a logo, just because they have social media and they have people looking at them does not mean that they are there for your best interest. And that takes time. And again, building relationships and really knowing who you're talking to.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Jack. And, before we go any further, I just want to make something really clear. And I've already said this, but I just want to expand on it a little bit more. And this is for, the folks listening. Again, Collectors MD is not anti-hobby. We're not anti-breaking. We're not anti-platform. And we're not saying every seller out there has bad intentions or is trying to rip people off. Most people in this space genuinely love the hobby and want to do right by their communities. But what we are saying is that the systems, incentives, and mechanics of modern live selling can create environments where good people make harmful decisions and where even honest sellers can unintentionally participate in practices that mislead buyers. So I like how you worded this before. This isn't about, vilifying the hobby. We're not trying to call people out. It's about protecting the people in it. It's about calling out structures, not the entire community, so we can build something healthier, safer, and more sustainable. Because, loving the hobby and wanting it to be better are not opposites. They're the same thing. And so a lot of the naysayers and folks that, are screaming from the sidelines that, why are you partnering with this platform when they're part of the problem? Like, no, that's not what it's about. Like, we're all saying the same thing here. We all want the same thing. for this industry, right? We want it to be healthier, safer, and more sustainable for the foreseeable future. But in order to do that, we all have to come together collectively and be on the same page. And that's really, really important. So let's talk about responsibility. In your mind, where is the line between hype and harm? And what does ethical selling look like in a format built on speed and excitement?
I think it's a really interesting question because there is definitely a part of this that we haven't talked about, which is the responsibility of the buyer. And there absolutely is a responsibility as a buyer to understand what you're paying for and what you are doing and what you're interacting with. But the responsibility of a seller, I think it's totally fine to talk about a card, to say, hey, this is what this card is. You don't see this card very often if you are well informed on the card, or this card typically goes in the $40 to $50 range. Great, that's fine. And talk about the card. Obviously, you're trying to sell. You can say it's a really cool card. Whatever. I mean, that's great. It's about that when you start to lie, right? There's a huge difference between hype and just straight up lying, and that's really what brought all this together. Where that clip was, hyping up a card is one thing, saying it's worth $2,000 when it's not even close to that. That's where we start to break lines, and we start to break that trust. And that's where I think there are a lot of things that you'll see. You can watch clips on TikTok of people who drastically overpay for cards, and you'll watch these auctions go, and the seller never says anything, right? They just put the card up, and it gets bid to maybe 4 or 5 times what it's worth, and it's going to happen, and so I think that is a different conversation because now we talk about buyers and the responsibility of understanding what you're doing. But it's those situations where now you start to go and say, wow, you guys, that card went for 50% of what it's worth. And when you start to say that consistently, I think it builds a culture in your lobbies of you guys need to start paying more. You guys, if you're always talking about and you guys are stealing from me, that these are going for 30, 40% of comps when it's not, then you start to create this, you have really valuable cards and I need to get in these auctions because you're telling me you're losing money, so I'm going to get cards that I can turn around and sell to make money. And I've been in those where there'll be a card that goes for sale, it's on auction, and having been in it long enough, I have a pretty decent idea, even in a 10 to 15 second auction, what a card is worth. And that card will go for an amount. And for fun, a lot of times I have my system set up and I will check comps. Even if I'm not even going to buy the card or not even interested in the card, it helps me to educate myself on what is a card worth and was I right in that my estimation. And I'll see a card go for slightly more than it comps for, and then the seller will say, "Man, you guys got a steal," or "Man, you guys are that card is like that's half of what it's worth." And so it's just that you create the culture in your lobbies of what people are going to pay and what people are going to think your cards are. And so I think you have to be super careful about actually understanding and not just saying things to create hype. If they got a great steal, fine. If they paid 20% of comp and you can say, man, you guys let them get it. And so if it's just that you're ignorant or you're just saying it every time because you don't understand what it is, I think that's where, again, if you don't actually know what it's worth, don't comment on it.
Right.
And I do think that there is a part of it, having talked to buyers and sellers, that they don't know about 130 points. So you have a lot of people who are using eBay or Market Movers or Card Ladder or anything. So they're using eBay last sold. They're seeing an $800, $500, $200 last sold on a buy it now. And so that's what they're taking as the comp. And so as a seller, I know people who they legitimately thought that was the price. They're not trying to scam anybody. They're looking at this as the last offer, and that's what they're pricing their card and they think it's worth. And so I do think there's a part of it too where it's everybody understanding either eBay working with their platform to show the true offer sold, or
Right.
really moving the hobby to using more consistent other platforms than eBay, just so that from all perspectives, we're on the same page and nobody's going in with misinformation.
Now, I want to ask you a quick side question. What you just outlined makes complete sense, and I couldn't agree more. So how would a platform like, let's say, Whatnot, introduce, let's call it a regulation or a rule that sellers have to abide by? How do they monitor that? How do they hold sellers accountable?
Yeah, I think that it gets really tough because because it's live auction, you don't typically have to list your card, right? You just put an auction in, a dollar start auction. And again, I think if there was, you had to list every single card that you were going to post over a certain dollar amount, and then it would automatically link to comps pages, is maybe a possibility, something that, allowing people to get information and see what that is worth. Or again, just having to list everything over a certain dollar amount so that if I want to buy it, I'm able to go into the show, during the show, or before the show, find that card that I know is coming up for auction in a certain amount of times, and then go do my research.
Right.
And so I think that that's one thing. Does that hinder sellers? 100%. Absolutely, it does. Would I do that for every single $1, $2 card? Absolutely not. I definitely think there's a threshold that you could come up with and say, okay, anything over this has to be, that's going to start, or a believe, and a value of this has to be listed, that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
And it would be very tough to do in a live selling environment where oftentimes you're just $1 starting items and you don't need to list it beforehand or give people what, any information. You actually typically want to hide those cards so that they don't have that ability to comp it before it comes up for auction.
Yeah. It almost feels like, we might get to a point where every single live stream needs like a neutral moderator that is employed by Whatnot, right? And obviously that's not realistic. So how do we leverage technology to layer in something like that? I don't know if it's AI, if, it's an algorithm that picks up on keywords, but, hopefully they're working on these sort of things and leveraging all of that money that they just got from the funding to help protect the consumer and not just continue to make more money. I know that's the end goal, and that's what companies are designed to do, but at the same time it's really important that you're looking out for your customer, you're looking out for your consumer, and making sure that you're providing that sense of safety. So I do want to ask you another question on this topic, but real quick, just want to answer Paul's comment here. He said, are these people screaming at AA for having responsible use callouts on retail packs of alcohol? What about warning signs, or what about warnings on packs of cigarettes? And then he went on to say, folks complaining about accountability are telling on themselves, in my opinion. So I think that this is a fantastic point, right? Like, no one storms liquor stores demanding they remove responsible use messaging, right? No one gets offended by warnings on cigarettes. Accountability isn't an attack, it's a safeguard. If the idea of basic consumer protections feel threatening, that usually says more about the person reacting than the message itself. So really sharp point there.
Yeah, I think, Alex, one thing though, with alcohol and with cigarettes, there's a known risk, right? And the reason that we have those is because people understood these are bad for you. I actually think that there's a big part of the hobby that doesn't see what is wrong. And so you're not going to be looking for regulation if you don't even understand there's something wrong. And I think that is kind of a part of it, that the people who are in charge, if they don't see that there's an issue, why would they be looking for regulation?
Right.
And so that, I think, is a big part of showing, or why it's so important to inform people on these things of why this is wrong. Because until we show the bad, we can talk about what we need all we want, but until we show why we need it and kind of the bad section. I work in nonprofit, and we say all the time, it is easier for us to show you the need versus all the stuff we want to do. Because talking about the things that we want to do is great. It is actually better to show people what is happening and what we are trying to help, and then show them how we're going to do it. And I think that is something the hobby, it's in a similar boat of, we talk about the things we want to do, but there's a lot of people that just don't think there's anything wrong. And until that they see that there's a bad side and what's happening and things that really do need to be corrected, there's not going to be a whole big push for regulation.
Yeah, it's a great point, and it ties back to the concept of regulating ourselves and protecting ourselves. If the platforms, if the powers that be aren't willing to step up and make these changes, we have to find ways to manage how we engage with the hobby. And so on the buyer side, what tools, guardrails, or education do you think would materially reduce harm?
I think as a buyer, so I've talked about this several times on this podcast, set rules for yourself. For us, if we don't know the value of a card, I will not buy it. Could I lose money? Could I have gotten a deal? Sure. But even since I started, my rule has been I will comp cards. And if I don't know the value, I'm just not going to touch it so that I don't put myself in a position where I'd overpay, 3 or 4 times. And so, but at the same time, educating myself. So a lot of times what we'll do is I'll pull up a Whatnot show, specifically with Star Wars, and we'll pull it up and I will just go through and I will comp cards with no intention of buying them. And I'll go through and it helps build my database of knowledge. Okay, this is what these cards generally go for. These are what these cards generally go for. And so now 2.5 years in, my database of, okay, what are things generally going for has expanded significantly. And now I do feel a lot more comfortable when I go into things of understanding what is it, what's it probably worth. I think anybody who has been in the hobby for any amount of time, when that Yamamoto image variation goes up and somebody's saying $2,000, your alarm bell should be ringing. And if they're not, then that would tell me you probably need to continue to educate yourself on cards, and not in a bad way, but start looking at and really looking what value is, because a non-autographed PSA 9 is never going to be $2,000. And specifically there, you think about that's the World Series time. It's not going to get any better than that.
Right.
And if the comps around the World Series time are $500, $600 for a 10, you're probably closer to 4 to 5 for a 9 in that range. We're not.
I would beg to differ. I would say probably closer to 2 to 3. PSA 10 demands a serious premium these days, and it's gotten out of control. I mean, we're talking about very, very minor differences in the condition, the surface, the corners, the centering, all these things. And it's so subjective, right? Like this is something that we've talked about at a great length, but all of these different grading platforms are just so different in how they approach the process. And so again, people just losing sight of the purity of what this hobby is supposed to be. And when everybody just cares about comps and grades, it takes that away. So to me, this is really the crossroads. Collectors want to trust the people selling to them, but the ecosystem rewards the opposite. So how do we begin to fix that?
Yeah, I think it's buyers. I think buyers need that education. Buyers, if you don't, you do have a responsibility to yourself to be informed. And I think when it comes to a live selling platform, if that's the route you really want to go, again, I think there's better ways to buy. And I think people don't realize that you can go buy those cards from other platforms or from eBay, and it allows you to set up a standard of, okay, I'm going to know what I'm going to pay for this. But if Whatnot is what you really want to do, or live selling is what you really want to be a part of, great. Again, I would set some ground rules for yourself. I'm not going to any card over this amount. I'm going to make sure I'm not going to bid on it if I don't know for sure. I'm going to look with comps, or I'm going to mute Whatnot. I mean, one of the things I say all the time is Whatnot is best viewed muted, because it takes away some of that emotional, that salesmanship of it, and just get rid of it and just walk and look at the cards, and okay, you can see the cards coming up, and kind of take that out of the equation. Is a good one, and one that I use myself. And I've been burned by that. I did it. I literally the other day had a stream open and I was watching and buying some stuff, and the seller, I didn't have it muted, and the seller said something, and in my head I was like, oh yeah. And so I paid $2 more, I think, or I upped my bid by $2 for one of the card. And I went back and I was like, oh, he just actually lied straight up with what he said. I was like, but that's, again, I broke my rule. I only got burned by $2. So there's obviously much bigger losses you can get in the hobby, but don't break your rules. Create an environment that works for you and is safe for you, and don't break those rules.
Yeah, it's all great advice. Red glasses artist.
That's my wife.
That's your wife? Awesome. Love it. She said the exact same thing you just said. Whatnot is the best when muted. You bring up a lot of really great points, Jack. And I think a lot of them, unfortunately for people, are just easier said than done, right? It becomes really hard to set those internal guardrails and stick to it, especially in an industry that is engineered to get you to subconsciously engage. We're talking about, again, the sudden death auctions, the high sense of urgency, the FOMO, the mindless doom scrolling. It all just lends itself to disaster, to creating an environment where people just end up spiraling. And next thing they know, they're chasing and they just can't control, that devil on their shoulder that is trying to rip the wheel away from them and take them down to degenerate highway. And that's sort of the nature of where we're at in today's society. It doesn't just apply to the hobby and gambling. It applies to social media and technology and the direction we're headed in. So a lot of this, all of what we're talking about, ties into mental health and self-regulating and holding yourself accountable and doing all of these things. And so it's really important to have things like routine, even if you're not in like a recovery program per se, be involved in a community where folks hold each other accountable and look out for one another. We always say we can't heal alone. We have to heal in group. We have to heal in community. Can't be done in isolation. The same thing applies with everything in life. Humans by nature we've always been interactive and social creatures. Like that's just how we are. And so it's really important to lean on your community, lean on your circle, make sure that, you have that support system in place, the safety net. And if you don't have one, seek one out. And Collectors MD, we welcome all walks of life. So whether or not you feel like you need help, you need to be on the road to recovery, you think you have addiction, you might not, like we accept any and everyone in this community. And so a lot of that is just really, really important. So we're going to shift over to our next segment, which is platforms, guardrails, and the future of live selling. So you've been inside of these platforms. What structural changes do you believe would make the biggest difference for both the sellers and the buyers?
I think, unfortunately, the tough part is with a live selling platform like Whatnot, without bigger regulations, there's realistically not a whole lot that can be done on the system side. There are things I would love Whatnot to do. And kind of as we've talked about, I do think that there should be, you should have to get rid of sudden death. I really think sudden death auctions, or any auction that starts with less than 20 seconds, should just get rid of it. I think that's a big step. I think having to list cards out so that people can go and do their research beforehand is important. I do think that you could look at moderators and being very intentional with maybe either getting rid of moderators altogether, because I think when you put the mod title on, there is a level of trust that is built that can definitely be negative in some situations. So I think looking at that, or who can be a mod, is important. And then I think the tough part is that buyer's remorse. Somebody buys something and then like, oh, I paid 3 times what it's worth. When you get into that situation of allowing people to cancel items, I do think you get into some really, really gray area, because maybe I paid $4 more than it's worth. Do I get to return it? At what point?
Returns, but not just the returns, the chargebacks that, Whatnot and Fanatics deal with all the time. There's a lot of nuances involved in the whole nature of this emotional transacting, right? Both on the buyer and seller side.
I almost think that if I'm a new buyer, if I'm new to the platform, it would not hurt Whatnot to not allow me to purchase right away. To make me watch a stream, or to understand something, or to have a video talking about different things, what giveaways do, how much they make, just again informing a buyer. But it's just tough. Again, it's a relational hobby where you're selling person to person, and even on Twitter, when you sell, you're going to run into people who are going to scam you. Every single platform has scams, and I think that is the just unfortunate thing, is that buyers it really is on you and your group. There's just not a whole lot of regulation above you to help you, which is unfortunate. But I do think that there are people in the hobby who will help you and who can come alongside you and give you that. And, kind of going back to something we talked about, if I was somebody who was on Whatnot as a buyer, if you have not comped the seller before, I would highly recommend that. Somebody you buy from, just sit down. We do this all the time. This is how we determine who we buy from. I will go in with no intention of buying from a show. I will pull the show up. I will pull my computer up, and I will just start comping out what they're selling. And it's very obvious very quickly you can just kind of tell what sellers are going to use hype to make money and who is actually going to sell cards in a reasonable amount. So do your research. Don't feel like you have to start buying right away. Understand the person you're dealing with. Go slow. Don't jump in. Don't dive in right away. And understand that there are other platforms. I think people don't realize that hobby Twitter or hobby Instagram, aside from just buying and selling cards, there are a lot of great people on there. Start following, start building relationships. If you don't have somebody right next to you, obviously I'm lucky that I have people in my city that I see at shows and I see at LCSs that I can talk to the hobby about. And that's tremendous. I understand there are people that don't have that 100%. Right. But there are people online that you can start to, and communities like yourself that you can start to interact with if you need that virtually and start to have conversations with.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot we can do, in terms of helping ourselves and helping our friends and family and neighbors. But in terms of the platforms, one thing that we do at Collectors MD is advocate for real reform. And so you touched on a handful of the things that we constantly push for and just, advocate for and try to create awareness around. And that includes things like real comp verification, where platforms should surface actual last sales, not just inflated or best offer strike through numbers. Mandatory transparency. Sellers must disclose when they're citing outdated, unverifiable, or non-comp data. Longer auction windows, which you mentioned, giving buyers time to think, to check comps and just make more informed purchasing decisions. Clear seller accountability, consequences for repeated misinformation or manipulative and predatory tactics. Integrated harm reduction tools. This is one of, if not the most important, things like spending limits, timeout or cool off periods, or reminders, just like they do on regulated gambling platforms. And then, algorithm reform. Reward ethical selling and accuracy, not just speed, volume, and hype. These are all things that are just so important and feel like such low-hanging fruit for these platforms. So it's remarkable that it's taken this long for folks to have, honest conversations about it. But more importantly, the fact that, these platforms haven't made any actionable changes yet that reflect any of what we're talking about. So hopefully we do start to see it in the coming months. But, ideally sooner rather than later. So there's also this broader question of accountability. Do you think platforms will willingly change, or will the hobby just have to demand it?
I definitely think, from my perspective, the hobby is going to have to be involved heavily. Again, we're not the only thing that's on their platform, right? They're a platform that sells many other items aside from cards. And I don't think it would be a bad idea for these companies to have, I would almost focus groups, accountability groups that are built from people within the hobby that are able to meet directly with the company and talk about things that they're seeing and issues they're seeing, so that the company is made aware of it. I do think there's a reality, as we talked about, that they may not know all of the nuanced things that we might see as predatory. I know that there has been some reform on Whatnot with breaking. We haven't even talked about breaking on this, right? And Whatnot obviously is one of those that does great when it comes to breaking, and it's a huge part of that platform of cards is live breaks.
Right.
And there's been a little bit of reform on that and requiring sellers to be, different things they have to do for verification. So that there's a small amount, and eBay followed suit again with breaking and only certain breakers, but or they started that. But until there's a way for the hobby to communicate to these platforms, I don't know that we're going to see a whole lot come from them directly.
Time will tell, and we're going to continue to do the work. So the hope is we start making enough noise where folks start to pay attention. folks with power, those at the helm, those in C-level positions at the likes of Whatnot and Fanatics and eBay and all the others. So we're going to keep doing our part, and hopefully in due time, you guys will start to see some of these changes and reform, initiatives be layered into the overall ecosystem. So last question on this segment, looking ahead, what would a healthier, safer, more trustworthy live selling ecosystem actually look like in your eyes?
I mean, it's one that removes the hype, right? Which is, it removes that FOMO from it completely. And just like with anything else, allows you to show cards, allows you to sell cards. And I think one of the benefits of Whatnot is something that, you get to buy more than one, right? That's great. So for myself as a buyer, platforms like that are great because I can build up a stack of lots of cards. And so I do think there's a lot of great things about live selling. But it's one that really puts the emphasis on getting rid of FOMO, getting rid of what we are literally seeing in ads as advertisement for why you should join the platform. That it's not about the hype. It's not about getting the most cool things. It's about here's the goods. Do you want them or not? What do you want to pay for them, and not influencing them to that they're cool because they won. Giving a little bit more power back to the buyer.
Yeah, well said, Jack. I think it's just a matter of stripping away a lot of these bells and whistles, all of the mechanics that have been embedded into the hobby over the last decade, and peeling back the onion until you get back to the core, the root of what made collecting so pure and enjoyable in the first place. So, I don't want to sound like overly cliche or unrealistic, but a lot of that is possible, but we need to come together as a community and be on the same page and start pushing for real change. So with that, we'll shift over to our rapid fire round. We're now officially calling this the reflection round as of this episode. So let's end with our reflection round. I'm going to ask you a question. You're going to hit me with your first thought and honest thought. You ready?
Yes, sir.
One hobby myth you wish collectors would let go
of? That whoever dies with the most cards wins.
The most overrated narrative in the market right now?
That's a great question. That you have to buy based on who you think is going to be valuable in the future.
The most underrated risk collectors ignore?
That no matter what, the value of a card is incredibly subjective and may not hold up in a week.
One company or platform you believe could change everything if they actually wanted to?
I do think eBay is the one platform that's closest to having better reform for the hobby.
A trend you're watching closely heading into 2026? Influencers in the hobby, and using a platform more than just selling cards. And lastly, one sentence that sums up where the hobby really is right now.
I think there is still a huge amount that are in the hobby for the right reason. And we just have to be wary of the small percentage that is in it for the money.
Well said. Jack, thank you, not just for being here, but for your honesty, clarity, and willingness to speak out in an ecosystem where silence is often the easier choice. Your content helps collectors understand moments that can feel isolating, confusing, or embarrassing, and it reminds them that none of this is their fault. They're responding to systems designed to override logic with urgency. To our listeners, conversations like this aren't about negativity. They're about transparency, empowerment, and building a hobby culture where people can enjoy collecting without fear of being misled or manipulated. If you've ever felt burned by a live auction, pressured by hype, or ashamed of a decision you made in the heat of the moment, you're not alone. And that's exactly why Collectors MD exists. We host free weekly peer support meetings every Wednesday from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern, and another meeting every Thursday from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern in partnership with the Problem Gambling Coalition of Colorado called Unboxed, powered by Collectors MD. You can access meetings, tools, resources, and all of our content at collectorsmd.com. Be sure to subscribe to the Collectors Compass across YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and all major streaming platforms. And check out our other podcasts, Behind the Breaks and Collectors MD Features. Jack, thank you again. I'm Alyx Efron. This is the Collectors Compass, reminding you to collect with intention, not compulsion. We'll see you next time.